Good morning, Chloe. How are you doing?
I am so excited to be doing this, so thank you.
Well, we're just as excited because I'll tell you, my father was in World War II, and I've been with Colonel Oliver North, and he has always told me that he says, you are not a broadcaster until you share the stories of the men and women that sacrifice their lives for this country. And it's like, well, how do you get them to talk? And then we bump into people like you, Chloe, and it's like, oh, you've got the story. And you do have the story in luck of the draw.
You know, I appreciate you saying that because when I was coming along hearing these stories about my grandfather, I sort of just thought everybody had a grandfather that was in World War II because that was the generation I was in, right? Everybody knew somebody who was in World War II, either family member or friend. And I just kind of assumed that everybody was a prisoner of war and that these experiences were kind of a dime a dozen. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s, after the book came out, when he was sick and he was diagnosed with cancer, that I went to the Air Force base that he flew out of in England, because it was not that far away from where I was studying that summer. And it was quite the journey back in time. Mm-hmm. It's now a museum. And it was such a remarkable day that I spent there with Ron and Carol, the little old couple that have really raised money to turn that Air Force Base, Thorpe Abbotts, into a museum. And my grandfather was so touched that I was there. And it was the first time I ever heard him cry. Oh. And I wrote about that in the foreword. He died almost a year later, exactly to the day. And a few years later, I don't really know what it was. I think Don Miller, the author of Masters of the Air, told me to go to one of these 100th bomb group reunions. And I thought that would be fun. And for those people that don't know, the 8th Air Force was divided up into squadrons. And within those squadrons were bomb groups. And my grandfather was in the 100th bomb group, known as the Bloody 100th. And so I started going to these reunions. And my first one was in Palm Springs. I think I was like 26 years old or 27. I'm now 36 and a half. And I went and they treated me like royalty. And they couldn't believe that I showed up. And I have gone every year to a reunion since then. And then over the years, I'm giving a really long answer. I wish I could give a short version, but over the years, I just realized that Grandpa's story was really remarkable. And what pushed it over the edge for me was when I knew Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg were going to be making a TV show about the 100th bomb group. I said, what a shame that Grandpa's book that he wrote for the family is out of print. What a shame that people can't read it if they want to. Yeah. I didn't think it was going to be like a bestseller, but I just said to my mom, I said, we need to get this published. And here we are 3 years later, and it's actually a bigger project than I expected, a lot more time. It's been really fun, and it's a lot bigger than I thought. We didn't just reprint this book. I mean, this is an entire rollout. So it's very cool.
What I love about your book, Chloe, and it's only because of the History Channel and because of the preservation of sharing the history through moving pictures, is that we always get the black and white photographs or we get the black and white stories. But your book is colorized. The way that this book is put together, I don't see a black and white world. I see a real world, a real man, a real story.
You know, I appreciate that. And I think that's because my grandfather was such a great writer. And that's the other thing here that I just want to stress to everyone. This isn't just, and there's nothing wrong with it if it was, this isn't like Grandpa's diaries that we published, which would be great too. This is Grandpa, who was very smart, a lawyer for Lockheed Martin. He actually had an incredible second half of his life that we won't even get into, of how he lived in Saudi Arabia running Lockheed Martin. And he was the one with the royal family brokering deals in the palaces to sell them airplanes. But that's a movie to star George Clooney in a few years, right? That I'll work on. Grandpa, I forget the name of it. It's like The Kingdom or something. Anyway, so Grandpa was a great writer and meticulous and a researcher and methodical. And he spent a decade working on this. Now I know what the heck he was doing in the basement for all those years that would drive my grandmother crazy, and all the papers and everything. But he did his research, dang it. anybody out there, he did his research. He spoke to historians. He spoke to his fellow men. He got declassified documents. He traveled around the country, National Archives, military archives, Air Force Academy, World War II Museum, you name it. He did it. And that's why the footnotes are wild. Bibliography, crazy. The appendices in the back, I had to help fact check those. Let me tell you, I don't ever want to do that again. I felt like I was reading Chinese. I didn't even know what I was doing. It's so crazy. And of all the grandchildren, the idea that like the bubblegum pink Barbie loving girl who, was half listening to these stories as a little girl, that I turned around, I became the journalist.
Yep.
I'm the one with this platform, and I'm the one, republishing the book. I think he would get a kick out of it that I'm the one that's like carrying the torch. I'm like the unlikely one here. I'm no World War II expert.
Wow. See, this is what I love about writing and the different generations and these moments like this with your grandfather and you, because as a writer myself, I always believe in one person, the future reader. And that's what you've presented something here. It's dear future reader, let me share with you a moment in history that can't be forgotten.
But I think that that's the whole point.
Yes.
I think that you cannot look to the future without looking at the past. And I hate to say it, and I hate to be a downer over here, but it's just like everybody didn't think that the pandemic could happen.
Yep.
Never in my mind. I'm watching like The Last of Us on HBO right now, and it seems so far away, right, from happening. It's like, actually, we all might get a parasite that takes control of our brain, right? So it's like, I don't just laugh anything off anymore. You watch World War II in color on Netflix. I have a friend of mine, he's an actor, Emil Hirsch. He starred in Lone Survivor, and he was telling me the other day that he was watching World War II in color. And you watch this stuff and you're like, that was so far away and so long ago. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, of course it could happen again. Of course there could be another Hitler again. Of course there could be potentially another draft again. So we all need to we need to learn from our mistakes.
See, and one of the greatest things about Luck of the Draw is the fact, and the re-releasing of this book, is the fact that we are in a state in this world right now where so much is being compared to World War II. And I can't imagine what Generation Z and the new generations are going to think when they're going World War. What? I don't get it. But we need books like this, and they need to be placed inside schools to where people can learn about it. It didn't just happen overnight. We needed this rough war to get here.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because this book, okay, I read All Quiet on the Western Front. That was not an easy read. I'm not saying that all parts of this are easy. There are emotional parts and parts that will make you cry, and the letters back and forth, the telegrams between him and his mother. But there are dense portions. But I think that there should be, which is why it's great for a lot of different audiences. The military enthusiasts, right? Those who served, those who want all the detail. Then there's the heart too. And then others, you're just going to learn a heck of a lot. But it should be required reading.
Yep.
It should, especially, I'm working on to see if I could get it to be required reading for the Air Force Academy. I'm speaking there next week to their cadets. And I think that it should be required reading for all Air Force for sure. Yeah. And I think it would be great if we could get it on college reading lists and things like that too. Yeah. And that's what I think Kirkus wrote. And Library Journal, one of them, and they're both hard reviews to get. They recently said that it's really good for anybody who is studying or going to be joining the Air Force.
I would love to see your personal notes as well as your grandfather's notes when he started speaking of the suicide mission for Black Week, because I mean that had to have been for the two of you an emotional moment in your personal lives when you were bringing all of this together.
Yeah, I mean, again, when my grandfather spoke to me about his experiences, these were fragmented moments over dinner.
Yep.
And my cousin Ben Rosser, he actually joined the National Guard. He went to VMI. He loved the military. So I got to listen to him talk about it with Grandpa. If you string it all together, there's definitely stories in there The only ones I remember him talking about are bailing out of the plane and parachuting out. But he left out details that 2 of his crew died, right? We knew he had shrapnel in his shoulder. But Grandpa didn't talk to me in specifics. Most of the family learned everything in the book when it came out. And then I didn't really learn, when was I able to actually eloquently, if you want to call it that, cohesively speak about Grandpa's experience? It wasn't until like my mid to late 20s when I really dove in to research it, to really be able to explain it. There were a lot of holes for me because it's not an easy story to fully wrap your head around. It's not simple. It's complicated. It's not just a war. There's these air battles and there are these missions and there's different planes and he's switching crews and there's different prison camps and there's different time periods. It's not like a linear story here. And there's a lot of sub-stories too.
There's a romance about your grandfather here and that a lot of guys can relate with, and that is, first of all, I love the fact that his briefcase was crammed with maps and calculators, and then he had a fascination with his watch. I mean, to a guy, that's like going, yeah, that's a real man right there.
I mean, I love that he looked at his watch as he jumped out of the airplane. Like it's on fire, right? I mean, he was meticulous. And to think that he wrote this decades after it happened, talk about a great memory. I'm just so glad that I have it all written down in one place. And I hope that this encourages everyone. You don't have to have experienced a war. Write about what it was like during the pandemic. Write it all down. Write it somewhere in a journal for your kids or your friends or your kids' kids. The next 2 generations, what if they don't experience something like that? And you can say that you lived through, whatever your political beliefs are, forget that. But you lived through a very significant moment in history. Write it down, right? And so I think that that's really important that we write down these stories, no matter how small we think, because you don't necessarily want to try to remember it all decades later.
Chloe, you speak my street, and I've got radio shows on iHeartRadio that deal with this on an everyday, daily basis. I have 29 years of daily writing here that goes through everything, and so the big word right now at 60 is what happens to it when I pass, and the strong word is do not throw it away or burn it up, because it's not for this generation. So I understand what you just said.
You and I need to grab coffee sometime. Where do you live? Are you in New York?
I'm in Charlotte.
We'll make it happen because you guys speak the same language. The bottom line is that, who cares if you don't think it's interesting or you think no one will read it? You don't know what your granddaughter's going to think. And I know that's a weird way to think about yourself in that way. And to think that far down the line, I mean, when you probably don't even know what you're having for dinner, right? It's like, are you kidding me? Let me write something for my grandchild. How egocentric is that? But no, you don't know. I don't know that my son's son is going to one day be like, wow, Grandma Chloe, she was cool. And she's a journalist and she did some cool shit, and I was we curse. I don't know. Anyway, she did some cool stuff and I want to write a book about her, or I want to find her. I want to publish her diaries. I don't have any, but maybe I should start writing some. So I think that what is the saying? One man's junk is another man's treasure. Yes. So at the end of the day, though, Grandpa jumped out of an airplane and he was a prisoner of war and walked through a death march. So I would say that that's some pretty cool stuff. And not cool. It's cool that he lived it, wrote about it, survived it. Obviously torturous, horrible. Men died. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a lucky one. He said in the book, he writes, you had a bullet with your name on it or you didn't. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It all came down to the luck of the draw. And that's the truth. And I think it's you could walk outside right now and get hit by a car. Yep. So I don't live my life in the present very well because I'm always planning for the future. But this definitely makes you appreciate stuff. The pandemic was really hard. And, just being isolated and being alone. We had a fire in my house. We lost our home fire. We're all okay. We lived that. But, life's hard for everyone, no matter what you're going through. It's all relative.
I had your grandfather's name in this next question, but I think I'm going to replace his name with your name. Was it more exciting or frightening to do this?
Well, I just don't want to let anybody down.
Right.
So I feel like I have to preface everything with all of these historians who helped me with, yeah, I know like maybe there's like a couple mistakes, right? Like I know a couple mistakes in the book which are minor, but they're like factual things that I should have seen. And they were wrong, I guess, when my grandfather wrote them, like certain data that has now been updated that the average reader is not going to notice,
Yeah.
right? But I feel bad about that, you know. But it's this has not been easy, and I've partnered with with so many amazing historians. Some of them are historians on the Apple TV series, and you know, it's not perfect, and it wasn't perfect when Grandpa put it out. You know, I'm doing the best I can, and I hope my best is good enough. And at the end of the day, like if a number is wrong, so sue me, you know, like
Dang.
no, but like, you know, it's all don't really please. I don't have anything. But it's like if there's some numbers wrong or something, you know, is off, sure, DM me, let me know. But at the end of the day, it's about the bravery, it's about
Yep.
the resilience, it's about the courage, right? So that's been the hardest part is that I just don't want to let anybody down. I really thought, you know, I think the reason that I take on so many projects in my life is because I'm totally naive, which is kind of crazy. And I really like don't give some certain things much thought. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna republish it. It's great. We're gonna do it. And it's already written, done. We'll do, you know, we'll spruce it up. No, not at all. This was like basically starting from scratch.
Oh, man. Man. Chloe, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always, always, always going to be open for you.
I am so happy, and we have to find each other somehow on Instagram. Don't disappear, my friend. This was fun. We're speaking the same language. I'm from the South. I'm from Atlanta. I went to
Wow.
Auburn.
There you go.
I can come down south. We'll grab a coffee.
That's why we're sharing stories. We're from the South. That's it. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you. I'm trying. Appreciate you.